Hello. Welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make our state great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I've got Chris with Montana Generational Justice. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a few minutes of your time.
Oh, you bet. So let's start with the high view. There's some changes going on, so maybe integrate the high view of what you guys do and what you're changing going on there.
Sure. As a nonprofit, Montana Generational Justice's focus has been working with Montanans to provide kind of essential estate planning documents. And so they've been at it actually, and their staff has been at it for a number of years. In fact, they've served hundreds of Montanans in legal document clinics, which we may have a chance to visit about here in a few minutes. But their focus now in those legal document clinics were primarily with seniors and those in rural communities. Now, the rural communities is still their focus, but they're expanding to broaden that age demographic. So it's including low and moderate income Montanans, it's including Native Americans, it's including veterans, and so that's sort of a new focus just within the last 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
Yep.
So changing to expand who you're serving.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's chat more about the need that's out there. What happens if you guys aren't doing the work that you do?
Exactly. Well, you know, their mission and purpose, and they really focus on protecting families and sort of securing their futures. And in that regard, when you think generally of sort of estate planning documents, you kind of say, well, what are we talking about? And what we're really talking about are things like a basic will. And again, surprisingly, you know, not many people may be having that document, and the value of that we could talk about a little bit. But then a real need that's occurred, mostly driven through medical and health institutions now, is having advanced directives. And those are your durable medical powers of attorney and durable financial powers of attorney. And then there's some other, you know, sort of supplemental or ancillary documents. But those are the main ones that in the past have been done for, again, as I mentioned, for seniors. And in many cases, that helps for a side issue, which you would not think of, but fraud and exploitation. Because people wouldn't have a will, and perhaps they're being taken advantage of their family ahead of an event where they're deceased, or a durable medical power of attorney, financial power, where, again, someone probably not as trustworthy as you'd like is taking advantage. And so having those clinics now, though, and expanding it to more than just seniors, because as you are probably aware in Montana, you know, fraud and exploitation can occur at many levels, okay? But the need for low, moderate income Montanans to have these sort of planning documents, you and I might sit here and say, well, I'll wait until I'm much older, okay?
Right.
And you know, the reality is, as I said, with advanced directives now, if you go to any medical facility, local medical facility here at St. Peter's, if you are an inpatient, right away they ask you, do you have an advanced directive? And really what they're asking, do you have a durable medical power of attorney or a durable financial power of attorney? Because if you're incapable of, you know, handling the decisions as they're providing treatment, then who is it? Who's your trusted agent? And many people assume, oh, it'll be a family member, you know, a spouse, a close friend. Well, again, I think the medical facilities have all come to the realization it becomes a little difficult when, you know, if something happens to you, Bill, as an example, whether it's a spouse or a trusted friend, they may well-intentioned come in and explain, here's what I think Bill wants. Guess what? That may not have been what Bill wanted. And then the treating kind of team, medical team, is faced with this issue of, so who are we supposed to talk with?
Right.
Because there may be competing interests. And so once again, that's part of the reason we're sort of expanding, because you know, it's not just seniors who are getting medical assistance, but you know, generally Montanans overall. And what we've also found is in talking with, specifically in the veterans population, once again, the treatment from the veterans medical treatment facilities all require some sort of a durable medical power of attorney, but most veterans who show up for some treatment don't have that document. And then, of course, in the case of the VA, they've got a standard document, but the issue that they have is how to explain it to somebody. They can explain the medical, but it's a legal document. And so once again, that's where Montana generational justice comes into play, that, we've got the medical, we're working with folks in the advanced directive arena, but also in the legal sense. We've got attorneys who help, during sort of giving advice in these clinics that we've had in the past, or paralegals who are able to help put documents together which are supervised by lawyers. So,
now, are there other documents you also prepare?
There are others that we've done in the past. The focus is mainly on the ones I've mentioned.
Okay.
But the other documents, we do help with a homestead exemption, for, again, low and moderate income Montanans. And that helps to protect property. Once again, is a lot of Montanans are not familiar with that fact, that your home can be protected for up to $250,000 under Montana statute, but you have to file a homestead exemption. So you have to be a homeowner. So it doesn't apply if you're a renter, if you don't own a home, okay? You can also, though, a very easy sort of estate planning tool or resource is a beneficiary deed. So for instance, if you own a home and you want to be able to convey it to, say, your children, ahead of time, you do a beneficiary deed. And then that doesn't come into effect until you're deceased. But it's sort of a simple way to do some estate planning. Lots of people, as soon as you think of planning, sort of estate planning, life planning documents, is, well, I won't worry about it until sometime later. And oftentimes people don't make provisions. And then there's issues, perhaps if you own a home, what are you going to do with it? Because you didn't have a will. Or you didn't make some provision for a beneficiary deed for those who you would have liked to have seen receive that property. So, but those are just some of the other ancillary documents, but those don't apply to many Montanans if they're not a homeowner.
Right.
But the other basic documents, the basic will, durable medical and durable financial power of attorneys, apply to everybody. So.
And those things change over time.
Yes.
And we tend to just put them off because we don't want to think about death, probably.
Right.
And yet they're really critical if you die prematurely or just die of old age. You need them in place.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, is keeping those current. And, it'd be, in some ways, it's almost like checking on your own car insurance. It's renewed every year, and so, you have changes. Or your own house insurance, you've got changes. You're absolutely right. Those documents, for any number of reasons, change over time. Not necessarily that the law changes, but maybe what you want, who you want to designate as a trusted agent might change. The types of things, particularly with the durable medical power of attorney, that you'd like to have implemented, because perhaps maybe you've seen a close friend or you yourself have gone through some medical treatments, and then you recognize, well, if I have to go through anything like this again, I'd rather not have this treatment, or I'd rather have this sort of treatment. The other is in one of the areas, the reason we focus with veterans is, and I'm a veteran myself, and I had this experience. When you're on active duty, before you can get deployed anywhere, the military makes sure you have these basic documents, whether you're single, whether you're married, for all the reasons we're just mentioning. Because if something were to occur that affects your life, they want to be able to know who is it that is to receive your property, or how are you, what sort of medical treatment. Well, the military does that. Well, once you leave the military, they never really do much follow-up to say, Bill, now you've left, now you're a veteran, you may want to revise this because life circumstances change. You might have a change in family, all sorts of other changes in life. And so that's one of the reasons, in talking with the VA in particular, we said not just the advanced directives, but like their basic will is something we would help the veterans. But the real focus is on the advanced directives at this point, and in some of the efforts we're doing.
Okay. So you mentioned clinics, is that?
Yes.
Let's talk about clinics.
Yeah, and so that's a good point, Bill. There's really kind of three approaches. And there's been the in-person clinics, where they've physically gone to almost 45 different locations, 45 clinics around the state at various times since like 2010, okay? and as I mentioned before, served, I think close to 4,000 Montanans, okay? In those in-person clinics, then, they set up the process where, there's an intake, Bill, if you had registered for the day, and a lot of these were at senior centers, you'd have an intake form with the basic information that you would have decided, hey, I'd like a basic will, these, other documents. They'd have an attorney or a paralegal there to work with you on that, to get that finalized. If a paralegal was working with you, there'd be an attorney close by to supervise to make sure it was final. But before you left that location, then in these in-person clinics, they'd have it witnessed and notarized with instructions to you what you should do with those documents. So what's developed, though, is we recognize is you can't go back to some of these locations year after year or month after month. So they developed where they would allow phone clinics. So if Bill got the information about Montana Generational Justice, would call and then say, hey, can I have these documents done? So we've done that, and they've done well over, I think, 700 Montanans in that fashion, okay, over the years. What's happened, though, is then the recognition also is, so that's okay, but there also needs to be sometimes some face-to-face, and some of the people have indicated, have said, hey, I'd like to be able to see the person who I'm talking with. So one of the things we have a small grant piloting on the advanced directive side is to use platforms like Zoom. And so we're testing that in various locations with the Native American population, because each one of the reservations have had the benefit of having an in-person clinic. Some of them have been able to do some phone clinics. And now we're going to, here in the coming next year through this very small grant, is try to go ahead and develop the platform off of Zoom to have this visual contact and also be able to have documents that people can see. And the other is it helps on the volunteer side, because as you can probably figure out on the in-person clinics, it's really manpower intensive. And the folks who help at those have been mostly attorneys and paralegals doing it pro bono, because of the requirement under the rules of professional conduct in Montana that attorneys should be doing so many pro bono hours. And so we offer this as an opportunity. But what's happened is, if we're going to have a clinic, say in Browning or over in Lame Deer on the Crow agency, to get an attorney who would come from, say, Missoula or even Helena for the day, is asking a lot.
You're investing a lot in travel time
Exactly.
that isn't productive.
Exactly, yeah. And while the product is obviously, the outcome is good because it produces these documents and it meets the need for the folks at these clinics, it also is time consuming, and we can do it a little more efficiently. So that's where on using a Zoom platform, the concept is that conceptually, and we've tested this, but that if there was a clinic, say at Browning, and there were individuals who needed an Indian will or these advanced directives, and perhaps somebody is there who is helping them draft it, but it can be reviewed then by an attorney who might be sitting in his office in Helena or Missoula or Great Falls, or even, and that's what we're also testing, is even maybe the person who is doing the initial sort of interview, even the paralegal, would be at a different location. And our job would be to have volunteers help to sort of organize that event, have the individuals like Bill sitting there, and then being able to, just like we're doing here today, talking to the camera, and then have the documents that they can pass back and forth through using web-based systems.
Okay, so we need to wrap up here. So basically they need to go to your website if they want to find out more about this.
Yes, yeah, and the other is there's an opportunity to donate, because to be able to fund and resource this, as I mentioned, they've been fortunate over the years to have some small grants. As I mentioned, we've got this small pilot that I've mentioned. But to continue that work, it's Montanans. So these legal clinics, there have been no charge for seniors, and up to this point for the low and moderate, and even the Native Americans, there's no charge associated. But as you can imagine, even if the attorneys and paralegals, volunteers, are giving their time freely, there's still some fixed expenses, printing materials, arranging for some of the locations, and many of the locations have been generous in basically, providing the space at no cost. But then go to the website. There's a place that they can donate online at Montana Generational Justice, and there's also there's a contact us if they want more information.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Chris.
Yeah.
And as always, I thank you guys for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening.